So for this video, I'm going to be creating my personal perfect Stephen King short story collection. Basically, I'm going to be choosing 20 short stories from all 7 of his short story collections with a few rules here. And I'm going to be creating my own personal perfect Stephen King short story collection. Definitely let me know if you want to do this on your own, whether you want to comment down below or whether you want to make a video about it yourself. Definitely welcome to using this idea. But basically the reason why I want to do this is because we recently just wrapped up the Stephen King short story book club over on the Book Astronomer Discord. This started like way back in like 2021 with Night Shift, of course. And we basically read all the way through his short story collections, starting with Night Shift, Skeleton Crew, Nightmares, and Dreamscapes, if I can get a hold of this chunker. Everything's Eventual, Just After Sunset, The Bizarre Bad Dreams, and then obviously his newest collection, You Like It Darker, we just wrapped up because that's his newest release, and a lot of us binged it. So yeah, basically I'm going to be choosing my favorite short stories from all 7 of these collections. I'm going to be choosing 20 of them. And kind of my rule here, just so I don't just choose a lot from any one particular collection, Night Shift. My rule is I have to choose at least 2 stories from each collection. So that's already 14 right there. And then I can pick an additional 6 from any collection I want to. And of course, short stories are very subjective, so you guys might not necessarily agree with my picks. So definitely let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. And like I mentioned, create your own top 20 down below, or if you want to make a video of it, go right ahead. I thought this was going to be a pretty cool idea, so without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right into it. So I'm basically just going to go in chronological order. I'm not necessarily going to like literally create the list. I'm just going to start with Night Shift and tell you which short stories I would include on here. And I will say right off the bat, right off the bat, Night Shift is hands down my favorite Stephen King short story collection. This is arguably like a top 10, top 15 book by Stephen King for me. I love this collection, and I will be including 6 short stories from here. And like I mentioned, the reason why I'm doing at least 2 from each collection is that probably half the list would be Night Shift, and that would be kind of boring in my mind. But yeah, I'm going to be choosing 6 from here, and definitely my favorites would be Quitters Inc., The Ledge, I Am the Doorway, The Mangler, The Last Rung on the Ladder, and Graveyard Shift. And so yeah, those are the 6 that I'm choosing for this video. And probably my all-time favorite Stephen King short story is Quitters Inc. It's about a guy who's willing to go to extreme measures to quit smoking, hence Quitters Inc. And the methods that this company he goes to uses to get him to stop to stop smoking. It's pretty crazy. I love this short story. Definitely my favorite in Night Shift, and I have to include it on here. We have The Ledge, which is kind of like someone who's... Yeah, it's going to be kind of hard to summarize short stories because you don't want to give too much away, but there's a guy on a ledge, and it gets pretty tense, and the ending is very awesome. So definitely check out these short story collections, by the way, if you haven't already read them with us. But yeah, The Ledge is awesome. I Am the Doorway is just a really cool kind of like sci-fi horror tale. Again, I don't want to give too much away, but it's really cool. And it may or may not have something to do with the cover here. It's really cool. The Mangler is kind of like on the silly side of horror. It's definitely very creepy, but it's basically about like a machine in this like big warehouse of like laundromat stuff. Like a machine comes to life and kills people in the night. And the way that they, try to get rid of it is just kind of goofy, but it's like classic Stephen King horror, and I really like it. The Last Rung on the Ladder is kind of more like on the sad and depressing, like character work kind of Stephen King that we know definitely more in like later collections. But like this one is just very stellar. And I know a lot of people that read Night Shift along with us originally for the book club, they cite this as their favorite. And I can completely understand why, and I definitely have to include it in this hypothetical collection of mine. And then I had a really hard time picking like a sixth one because I know like I had to have one of these. I ultimately went with Graveyard Shift because it's just such a fun story. It's about a guy who has to do a bunch of like cleaning in this like basement cellar in this kind of like abandoned building, and he comes across some creatures, giant rats, and it's awesome. Very fun, very just classic 70s horror Stephen King stuff. So I definitely had to include that one. So yeah, those are the 6 stories from Night Shift I'm going to include here. Quitters Inc., The Ledge, Eye in the Doorway, The Mangler, The Last Rung on the Ladder, and Graveyard Shift. And then we come to Skeleton Crew. And Skeleton Crew, it's often cited as his second best collection, but I would disagree. I would agree that the highs in this collection are very high. It's definitely, Stephen King short stories that I would include in my top 10 and my top 5. Like the highs in here are really good, but the lows are pretty low. There's a lot of like poems and just very forgettable or just meandering or just not very good short stories mingled in here. You do have The Mist, but I'm not counting The Mist because it's a novella, so keep that in mind. But I do have 4 short stories in this collection that I'm going to use for this. So the first one, of course, is going to be The Jaunt, which is a pretty cool sci-fi. I think Stephen King often does good short sci-fi horror. He doesn't necessarily do it well with long form, but his short story sci-fi stuff is really good. And this one is definitely cool. It's kind of like how someone discovers teleportation, but there's like a certain rule that you have to follow, and someone may or may not break that rule, and it's very creepy. You also have Survivor Type, which is excellent. It's about a doctor who gets stranded on an island, I think after a plane crash, and he's basically there with a bunch of drugs that he's smuggling, and I don't want to get too much into it, but it's really gross and really cool. Great story. You also have The Raft, which is basically just classic like teenage horror. You've got 4 horny teenagers and they get kind of stuck on this raft in the middle of this lake, and there's this creature that's in the lake, basically this blob kind of thing, and it's trying to kill them. Classic horror setup, works very well, love it. We also have maybe an underdog story. I know some people really like it, but a few people that read the collection were kind of mixed on it. But I really like it. I also love kind of the pseudo Dark Tower connections that are in this story. And we have Mrs. Todd's Shortcut. And this one's all about someone who is just obsessed with finding a shorter route to a destination. And eventually the shortcut just defies human logic, because like if they're looking on a map, like the odometer, like they're going shorter than they possibly could be. And it's just really good. And if you like the Dark Tower and you like how weird Stephen King can get, definitely recommend this one. Definitely have to include it on here. So yeah, those are the 4 that I'm going to include from Skeleton Crew. Again, they're The Jaunt, Survivor Type, The Raft, and Mrs. Todd's Shortcut. Then we have Nightmares and Dreamscapes, which is definitely my least favorite collection. It's got like 20 some short stories in here, but a lot of them are just so long, even kind of ranging into the novelette. And I wished some of these stories would be kind of shorter or more condensed or just more interesting. A lot of them just weren't my favorites, but there's definitely, if I had to pick 2, it's very easy because these are definitely my 2 favorite from the collection. We have Suffer the Little Children, which actually, funnily enough, it was originally supposed to be in Night Shift, but it got bumped out, I think, for gray matter or something like that, which, is fine. But Suffer the Little Children definitely reads like classic Stephen King, because it is. It was supposed to be in Night Shift, and it's just so good. It's basically about this teacher who thinks that their classroom for like young little children it's just creepy children. And King did it very well. Definitely my favorite in this collection by far. And then if I had to pick a second one, it would definitely be the end of the whole mess, which is kind of, I don't even know how to describe this without spoiling anything. I think it's written, uh, it, I guess the best way to describe it is if you've read Flowers for Algernon, it's kind of like that a little bit. It's kind of like how the end of the world starts, and I don't know, just read it if you haven't. But I'm definitely going to include it in here because honestly, I don't know what else I would include. These are definitely my two favorites from Night Shift. Not Night Shift. Nightmares and Dreamscapes. Definitely my favorite from this collection. And if I had to pick two, easily these would be the two selections. And then we come to Everything's Eventual. Again, not necessarily one of my favorite collections. Kind of a mixed bag a little bit. But it's got definitely one of my all-time favorite ones. Definitely, if it's not top 10, it's top 20. But, well, yeah, I'm doing a top 20, duh. But, yeah, Autopsy Room number 4 is so good. It starts off this collection with a bang. It's basically about a guy who wakes up and is about to be, oh God, what's the word? He's on an autopsy table and people are going to start cutting into him. But he kind of wakes up and realizes that he's not dead, but he can't move or say anything. So he kind of just has to figure out a way to get out of the situation. And the ending is quite hilarious. It's so good, and I love it. So yeah, that's definitely got to be one of the things I include in the collection. The other one, I wasn't sure what to go with, but definitely my second favorite in the collection, even though, you know, it's not necessarily horror, I would say. It's LT's Theories of Pets, and it's basically just about how, you know, like married couples and just people in general, their feelings on pets and like how just pets can be involved in people's lives, especially as couples. And this one's fun because if you listen to the audiobook, it's narrated by Stephen King. He's narrating in front of a crowd of people, so you get kind of the reaction of everybody. It's definitely one of his funniest stories. So I wasn't sure whether to include that because a lot of the stories that I'm including in my kind of video for here are definitely more on the horror side. But if I'm being honest, this is my second favorite in the collection, so might as well just throw it in, and you know, it's fine. But yeah, LT's Theory of Pets, definitely my second favorite in this collection, and it's hilarious. And Just After Sunset, this one was also kind of a hard decision here because actually my three favorites in this collection are all novellas, and I'm trying to only include short stories. So I didn't include Gingerbread Girl, A Very Tight Place, and In. So those are all novellas that are all really good. Some of my favorite novellas of all time. So if I'm not including those, I'm definitely going to include The Cat from Hell, which again, if you look at kind of the notes of like when these stories were written, another classic Stephen King short story that I don't know if it was supposed to be in Night Shift, but it was definitely written in the 70s, and it's got that 70s vibe of just classic Stephen King horror, and I love it. Just kind of like Suffer the Little Children, too, of like, oh, you can definitely tell that this has that Stephen King edge of being written in the 70s. The Cat from Hell, like the title kind of describes what it is. It's about an evil cat, and it's so good. I love it. The other one that I'm going to include is a story called Mute, which is about a guy who goes to a Catholic confessional and starts confessing some stuff. And he's also talking about this hitchhiker that he picked up who claimed to be mute. He's not quite sure in the moment if he's faking or not. And where the story goes and how it ends, I think is really good. And definitely, if I had to pick two short stories from this collection, it would definitely be The Cat from Hell and Mute. And then we come to The Bizarre Bad Dreams, which is probably my second least favorite of his short story collections. We recently read this for the book club, obviously. I liked it a lot more than I originally did when it first came out, but still kind of a mixed bag for me. But if I had to pick two from here, definitely my top one from this collection, definitely a favorite of mine, is The Dune. It's all about this guy who kind of stumbles across this dune, and kind of like the concept of Death Note in a way. Like there's a name that gets written out in the dune, and eventually that person dies. And so it's kind of got that similar premise. It definitely goes into some interesting directions, and the very ending kind of ends abruptly, but you're like, oh, that's kind of cool. But yeah, so The Dune, definitely my favorite short story from this collection, and kind of wavered back and forth between the second one I would pick, but ultimately I'm going to go with Batman and Robin Have an Altercation. That one is kind of creepy, but also very satisfying ending, and not necessarily horror, but it's definitely in a situation where you would not want to find yourself in. I really liked it, and probably my second favorite in the collection. So those are the two that I would pick from Bizarre Bat Dreams: The Dune and Batman and Robin Have an Altercation. And then, of course, we come across Stephen King's brand new collection, You Like It Darker. And just like with Just After Sunset, my favorites in the collection are all novellas. So I'm not going to include them on the list. Those would, of course, be Danny Coughlin's Bad Dream, Two Talented Bastards, and The Answer Man. So those are like my favorites, but they're all very long novellas, kind of. So if I had to go with short stories, definitely my favorite short story, and kind of the popular one it seems for this collection, is The Fifth Step. This one is very good, and definitely, I would say kind of at the beginning, you're not quite sure what to make of it. Like when I was reading it, it was like, oh, this is going to be more literary, whatever. But then you get to the end, you're like, oh. So it definitely harkens back to classic Stephen King horror. The ending is what makes this story. It's very good. So definitely check this out. But yeah, The Fifth Step has got to be on here. Even if I didn't have my rule of like, you have to have two from each collection, it would still probably be on here because it's really good. And then the second one I'm going to go with is On Slide In Road. And it's about a family who's on a road trip who has to go to a family member's funeral, but they get stuck for some reason. And I don't want to necessarily say too much about what happens after that, but I will say that Grandpa in this collection is awesome. And it definitely kind of, at the very end of the story, what I will say is that Stephen King gives a nod to Flannery O'Connor. So if you know who that is, you might be able to guess the direction the story goes into, but it's very good. It's very short, but it definitely packs a punch. So those are definitely the two short stories I would choose from You Like It Darker: The Fifth Step and On Slide In Road. All right, so to recap, the 20 short stories that I would include in my hypothetical perfect Stephen King short story collection, even though Night Shift would get 5 stars. If I had to pick, it would be Quitters Inc., The Ledge, I Am the Doorway, The Mangler, The Last Rung on the Ladder, Graveyard Shift, The Jaunt, Survivor Type, The Raft, Mrs. Todd's Shortcut, Suffer the Little Children, The End of the Whole Mess, Autopsy Room 4, LT's Theory of Pets, The Cat from Hell, Mute, The Dune, Batman and Robin Have an Altercation, The Fifth Step, and On Slide In Road. So those are all 20 of the short stories I would include if, I had the stipulation of choosing at least 2 from each of these 7 collections. And if you wanted some honorable mentions that I was thinking about adding, but I wasn't quite sure, Night Shift definitely had a couple. One for the Road is like the vampire kind of sequel to Salem's Lot kind of deal. One of his creepiest short stories he's ever written. I definitely thought about having that one. There's also Gray Matter, which is just one of the more disgusting ones from Night Shift, but definitely classic Stephen King. I could keep going with Night Shift, but those were like right on the edge of making it. Also, unpopular opinion, I really like Beach World from Skeleton Crew. I know a lot of people don't like that one, but that one almost reads kind of like a Ray Bradbury story, but definitely darker. And again, sci-fi, I really like his sci-fi horror, so, there's no honorable mention from Nightmares and Dreamscapes. Basically, I have my 2 that I wanted. Everything's Eventual had a couple options. Lunch at the Gotham Cafe, definitely creepy, but also more on the funny side too. That Feeling, you can only say what it is in French. I really kind of like how ominous that short story is, but ultimately, I'm fine with what I picked. Just After Sunset, you know, I picked the 2 that I wanted, so that's fine. Bizarre Bad Dreams, Morality or Afterlife could have been really good ones too. And then from You Like It Darker, I thought about having Lori or even maybe the Turbulence Expert, but no, probably not. I'm still happy. I'm just happy with my my picks here. So yeah, let me know what you guys think of my ultimate Stephen King short story collection, where I choose 20 of them, at least 2 from each of the 7 collections. So yeah, let me know, and definitely let me know if you agree with me or not. And definitely leave down below what are your favorite Stephen King short stories. And if you want to compile your own list from kind of my stipulations here, pick your 20 or even make a video about it. I'd love to watch it. Definitely link it to me if you want to let me watch it. That would be a lot of fun. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed this one, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already. Like I mentioned, Bookerstreamer Discord link down below, and my Patreon and my Amazon wish list down below as well. Thank you guys so much, and have a fantastic doodly ass day. Yeah. Do it.